So welcome. You've made it to the last parallel session of the conference. After this, we just have a summary and a final panel. So this is our last really content-filled piece of the agenda. And you know, we've heard some really great talks around soil science, what's going on with soil carbon in the soil science world. We've heard a whole set of talks around measurements. We've heard about policy. And all of us are quite interested in this carbon farming topic. And so all those things are part of carbon farming, but there's a lot more to it than that. And we tend to get really involved as soil scientists in the measurement and in which practices can support soil carbon building, etc. And we forget about all the surrounding aspects to the markets. And so this session is talking a little bit more about some of those things that surround the market, different looks and takes on it that we might not have heard in the other sessions. So it's a diverse session with quite different perspectives, but all of them are on that kind of edge of thinking about how these things really work. How does this carbon farming thing really work? Unfortunately, one of our speakers who's in the program, Lambert, has fallen ill and won't be here. So we have 4 speakers, which is quite a luxury, actually. I don't know if in the other sessions, we've had so many speakers, there's no time for discussion. But this time we have 4 speakers, 1 online will be the first speaker. And so that means we probably do have a little bit more time to discuss, which is great. So how we're going to run it is that each speaker will have about 15 minutes. And then at the end of each speaker, we'll ask if there's any maybe take 1 or 2 or 3 clarifying questions to them directly. And at the end, the 3 people who are in the room who have spoken can join on the stage for a general discussion. So I have to get out my paper and my glasses. Our first speaker, is he online, Christian?
Yes.
Christian, yay. Christian.
Hi, good afternoon.
Also, good afternoon. He's the head of the Unit for Land Economy and Carbon Removals at the EU DG Climate Action. And he's here to speak to us about recent developments regarding the EU's CRCF framework. First thing he's going to have to do is tell us what is the CRCF framework. And as I explained to the audience, we're going to take some time for questions to you directly afterwards in case you can't stay. So please go ahead, you have the floor.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. Very happy to be with you. Sorry that I couldn't come in person. Good to see the increased interest in the room, or at least like in the first half of the room that I can see. Also, thanks very much for the good introduction. So I'm an economist, so I don't understand a lot about soil science, but what I try to do is to make an economic model out of carbon farming, and to try to get for our farmers, for our foresters and others involved in the value chain to get more value out of a good management of our soils, forests, and the biomass that comes out of it. Okay, I'll share my presentation, and let me start at a very high level. That is with our objective in European climate policy. And this is to make Europe climate neutral by 2050. So this means, in the first place, we need to reduce our emissions. We need to reduce the use of fossil carbon. There we are on a good way. We have more and more renewable energy in the system. We are progressing towards the decarbonization of our industry, of our transport, electric vehicles. This is all going ahead. We are positive that we reach our targets in 2030 of a 55% reduction of emissions compared to 1990. But even if we go to 2050, we will always have emissions in the system, probably from aviation, which is very difficult to decarbonize, from some parts of the industry, and of course also from agriculture. We'll always have emissions from livestock, from fertilizer. So to get to climate neutrality, and then in the future beyond, to really then getting CO2 out of the atmosphere on balance, we need to get better at what we call carbon removal. So taking CO2 out of the atmosphere, keeping it in our soils, in our forests, the products that we produce out of them, like, for example, long-lasting construction materials. And then at the end of the value chain, when we incinerate the biomass, when we incinerate, for example, a wooden building, we shouldn't let the CO2 go back to the atmosphere, but capture it and then store it geologically, for example, in the empty gas fields of the North Sea. So we should come in the bioeconomy to value chains that are effectively good for the climate, because they take CO2 out of the atmosphere and don't let it go back to the atmosphere. So, and this should be the value chains of the future that we need to build when we go towards 2050 and beyond. And this is where we want to start our work now. And as always in climate policy, we start with what we call monitoring, reporting, verification. We need to know which actions lead to which benefit for the climate. And this is why we have, since the last year here in Europe, the framework for the certification of carbon removals and carbon farming, where we develop methodologies so that you can say at the individual farm, at the individual forest, or then at the industrial or energy installation, okay, how much carbon is removed from the atmosphere. And we are now already developing the specific methodologies. So like when we start with the value chain, what we call carbon farming, so on planting of trees, afforestation, soil management and agroforestry, and rewetting of peatlands. Rewetting of peatlands is with us an emission reduction. Then we also started developing a methodology on carbon storage in buildings. So well managed and built houses and so on can be a great carbon storage over several decades or even centuries, and we also want to reward that. And then at the end of the value chain, as I said, we'll have permanent removals. So this is the capture of biogenic emissions, like from pulp and paper mills, from waste incinerators, from bioenergy plants, and then the geological storage, then direct air capture and storage, and then, which is also related to agriculture, biochar, so pyrolysis. You burn biomass at a very high temperature, and then the CO2 stays bound, and you can use that biochar then, for example, as a nutrient and put it on the field. So, as I said, we develop these certification methodologies. We do that together with an expert group, with a lot of soil scientists. We are very happy about the input that we get. We have several quality criteria, as we call them, on the quantification methodologies. So, should we use soil sampling? Should we use models? How can we combine those? What is the role of remote sensing? We have a set of liability rules, of additionality rules, and then we also have a set of sustainability criteria. So everything that we certify, so if you certify a ton of carbon removed in soil, this must be done in a way that is also good for biodiversity. So this is why, for example, we're also very interested in agroforestry or rewetting of peatlands. And then, of course, we also have liability rules. What is important to say is that with us, the certificate will only be valid as long as it's monitored that the soil is still within the soil. If a farmer gives up a practice and the carbon is released, then our certificate loses the validity, and if you used it for a claim, you would need to replace it. And then we also work on an EU-wide registry, so to simplify the trading. This registry should be live by 2028. We'll look at the blockchain methodology, blockchain technology, so to link existing registries. And of course, we have third-party verification. So our whole certification process is very much inspired by the rules of the Renewables Directive for the certification of sustainable biomass, if you are familiar with that. And we hope that a lot of the certification schemes, certification bodies that are already active in the certification of sustainable biomass will also find it interesting to go into the certification of carbon removals. So, what is the timeline? As I've already said, the legal framework is in place. We want to come with the proposal of our first certification methodologies still this year. All our expert groups are online, available on our website. In the same time, also this year, we come with our proposal on the verification rules. So we are open to public, private certification rules. So you may know we are open to Label Bas Carbone in France, the same way as we would hope that Vera, Gold Standard, or Isometric want to join us. Then next year in 26, we would start with the recognition of the certification schemes, so that they can start the certification of farmers. What is also important to know when we talk about farmers, we expect that several farmers will get together. So this is what we see already now happening, that it will not be an individual farmer who will go to the carbon market and get certified, but that there will be an intermediary like Soil Capital, BASF, or cooperatives. We see very different business models there, who will take over all the paperwork. And then in 26, we will work on our next methodologies on sustainable forest management and carbon storage in buildings. And then by 28, we should have that EU registry. So that's a lot of work, so to say, on the supply side to make sure we have a reliable supply of carbon credits, of certified carbon removals, emission reductions, and then we need to market those, because the idea is that we get more private money here to support our farmers and foresters. So, what is the legal framework, so to say, on the demand side? We have the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive in Europe that sets out how big corporates can report their climate claims, so their net zero claims. So this is something that a lot of the big food processors are very interested to tell their consumers, that they source their food in a sustainable way, and there are specific reporting standards on climate, where there's the link also to our carbon removal certification framework. Then we have the Green Claims Directive, so it's a Commission proposal that is currently in co-decision, that has more detailed rules how companies can communicate about environmental climate claims towards their customers. So this is all voluntary action. We are also interested in looking, okay, how could we develop possibly in the future a regulated market? So to create clearer market conditions, a clearer demand for farmers and foresters to simplify the rules. And we are now already doing our second study on how like an emission trading system could look like for the agri-food or forestry value chain. And I quickly want to go into this on the next slide. So our idea, or our important premise is that it should be voluntary for farmers and foresters. So those who want to earn additional income from adopting more sustainable soil management practices, forestry management, should be able to earn additional income. So they get certified with us, get an amount of certified credits that they then can sell. So, and from where would the demand come? What we already discussed on the last slide, it would be from within the value chain, so from the big food processors, but also from the big biomass processors. So all the big corporates that are active in these value chains, be it Carrefour, Danone, or someone like the IKEA, that through using our CRCF credits could have a more standard way, and probably a cheaper, simpler, more harmonized way on how to make these claims. Then one could think about public-private purchasing programs, so that we really create an EU-wide market for sustainability. So, for example, we as Commission or member states could get together maybe with the food corporates, and to kick off the market, we say, okay, we want to buy 10 million tons of soil carbon credits. And then, of course, there's also still the option for demand from outside the value chain. We see like airlines or other companies that also in the future will still emit, may want to buy also carbon credits from the forestry, from the agricultural value chain to offset their emissions. Like a company like Microsoft is very active on this market. So there could be quite a good demand from several sources that will make it attractive for farmers and foresters to participate in such a market. Of course, if we put, for example, an obligation on big food processors to buy a certain amount of the soil carbon credits, the market demand will become much more stable and will get more attractive for farmers and foresters to participate there. So these are issues that we are currently looking into. We will soon publish our second study on possible market designs. And yeah, very much look forward to continue discussing with the sector how could we really create a harmonized and effective market for carbon credits for the agri-food and the forestry value chain that will generate additional income for farmers and foresters. So that was my short overview. Hope helpful for you, and thanks for your attention.
Thank you so much for that great quick introduction. Okay, we already have one hand up. We'll take a few questions because Christian won't be able to stay to the end either, so we'll take several questions for Christian. Are you going to, oh yeah, as long as you use the microphone, hello. I suppose you can hear properly.
Is this working? Okay. I have two brief questions. One is a clarification on, I think you said if farmers engage in soil organic matter enhancing methods and are part of the market, then of course they can go for a certificate. And but then you said if after the end of that activity, I think your words were if the CO2 is removed or lost. My understanding of CRCF was different. I thought as soon as the MRV stops, the activity stops and MRV stops, the CO2 is considered lost, irrespectively of whether it has been lost or not. And the second quick question was on you mentioned airlines can participate. My understanding was that airlines are in the ETS, so they must not go into the voluntary market. Can you clarify?
Yes, on the first one, your description is more correct. As soon as the monitoring stops, we are of course not anymore sure whether the carbon is in there, and it loses its validity. Yes, airlines are currently with their flights within Europe included in the emission trading system, but they may be interested to go beyond that, and several of them do this. When you see, or several when they when you book a ticket, they often propose that you pay a higher price to offset your emissions. One also has to see what is the development for international flights to and from Europe, like to the US and China, or there's the ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, that is or has been building already for several years CRCF, which is an international offsetting program of emissions. One has to see whether this takes off. In the current geopolitical situation with Trump, it's a bit unsure what is the fate of that. So they are also voluntary offsetting for international flights. Could also be an interesting business case for the future.
Great, thanks. While we're teeing up the next person, maybe I'll follow up. I'm curious how you're thinking about these troubling issues in the voluntary market now around permanence and additionality. Are you thinking about those issues?
Yes, very much so, very much so. And this is why we've chosen to be very explicit in saying, when we talk about permanence, our credits, our certificates are only valid as long as there's monitoring. So if a company has bought one of our credits and wants to make a claim for offsetting, and the farmer stops doing that, then that company would need to buy another credit to replace that and maintain the claim. But what I would hope, of course, is that carbon farming, regenerative agriculture, is so attractive that no farmer will stop in the future, and we will not have that risk of permanence. But on the other hand, it's not a solution to commit a farmer upfront to do a certain practice for 1, 200 years. So we hope that with the solution that we offer, we can effectively address this permanence problem in a transparent way. But I think what is equally important is that we build a specific market for Europe, where it's clear what is the demand, where it's clear what is the obligation on how many certificates do you need to buy. I think a big problem of the voluntary carbon market is that it's a pretty unregulated market, and you have a lot of uncertainty about the quality, about the future demand. It's a little bit like a market for second-hand cars, where you also don't know what you get, and markets have big problems to perform well under these conditions. So this is why we are looking into really establishing a more reliable, a more regulated market for Europe, and to build on the experience that we have from the emission trading system in other sectors in Europe.
Thanks. I think we have another question teed up in the back.
Thank you. My name is Roland. I'm an agricultural journalist. Demand from other value chains. The farmers are responsible for food, feed, and biomass. And now you try to overload the farming practice with the responsibility to be responsible for the emission reduction for other value chains. Would you agree with this?
No, not at all. Not at all. So I think what is, as I said, first, we don't want to overload anyone. It should be voluntary, whether a farmer wants to go into more sustainable management. Second, we want to create more transparency within the value chain and make it easier create a level playing field, both for the companies that want to invest in this, as well as the farmers. So typically what Europe can do is to create a market, to harmonize, to make things simpler. And I think the majority of the demand will come from within the value chain. But I think for certain types of activities that we see, like the rewetting of peatlands. Peatlands are only like 2-3% of our agricultural area, but one of our biggest emission sources. So I think here it could be an attractive model too. Okay. And there you have to take out the land pretty much out of production. So there it could be interesting maybe to look also into demand from outside the value chain. But for the most part, what we want to do is within the value chain to make a clearer case for investments into sustainability and create more income for farmers. We don't want to burden anyone.
So does this mean you won't need like the Scope 3 independent insetting operations? They would come through this more organized scheme?
This is something we are discussing. So and I would hope that with what we do with carbon removal certification and the certified units that we create and the certificate of compliance is that we can offer a solution that is more harmonized and simpler than the current approaches that you have for Scope 3 reporting.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, I think we have a question back here.
Yes, thank you, Elias von Straten from Naturland Organic Farming Association. Just to picking up on the statements that you made, how would this approach be different in terms of convincing buyers to purchase those credits? Because I understand, of course, maybe will be more transparent, more regulated, more comparable in this framework compared to, let's say, and just picking the example of the gold standard, because today, I guess, or from what we see, the gold standard is quite elaborated or certain standards of it, and still the uptake is rather fluctuating and also limited to a certain extent. So, if it's still on a voluntary base, how would you make, or why would you anticipate that then the offtake ratio will be significantly higher or better than in the current way? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I think what is essential is that we offer a solution which makes the accounting within the value chain, the Scope 3 accounting, more harmonized, easier, more standardized, and then maybe even thinking towards, okay, could we put maybe a small obligation on the big food processors, on the big retailers, so that you have a level playing field between all of them, and all of them contribute to, which is a public good, which is the health of our soils, and then you would have a much clearer and much more stable demand. And I think you need to work on that. You need a much more transparent, clear, more clearly structured market. And I think there's an interest from all of us, and I think also still in the value chain, also in view of the impacts of climate change, to go there. But as I said before, a completely voluntary market in the long run will probably not work. So first to see is whether the harmonization standardization services that we provide will already take us further, or then in the long run to bring even more clarity, we could maybe think about some obligations.
Great. I think we have time just for one more question for Christian before we move on to the next speaker.
It's a very short question. You said that in 2025, so this year, there will be the first methodologies that will be published. Can you be a bit more precise on when we will see them or when we can download them?
We've published, I think, in May, our latest papers. And we are now working to put them into a legal draft, what we call Delegated Act. And we would hope to publish them in December, have then an expert group meeting in January and a public consultation afterwards.
Great. Thank you so much, Christian. This was super informative. And we really wish you very well. Really good luck with this effort. I think it'll be brilliant.
The same to you. And then, of course, every support is very much appreciated. As I said, we are very happy about the support that we get from the soil science community.
Great. Thanks. Thanks again. So our next speaker is Dr. Flora Desmet. She's a researcher at Agroscope in Switzerland, and she's going to be speaking about the climate impact of non-permanence.
Great. Well, thanks for the introduction, and also thanks to the organizers for inviting me and letting me the opportunity to present the work I'm doing at Agroscope in the context of the Marvik project. I guess the presentation just before was a good introduction to my topic, which is about the climate impact of non-permanence. One challenge we have with carbon farming and the carbon sequestration in carbon farming is that we have this uncertainty about the fate of the carbon after the project ends. So this is a very schematic example, but if we have a project that lasts, for instance, 15 years, then we are not sure whether the carbon will stay durably stored in the soil. That would be the best case scenario, or if we will have a different release that can be even like rapid release or progressive release, we don't know, and this will lead to non-permanence. And this is beyond the project longevity, so once the monitoring has stopped. And so those three scenarios, I will use them throughout the presentation, but what I want to point out first is that the three projects, they will have sequestered the same amount of carbon at the end, but then in the end they will have very different climate impacts if you look at it on a longer term. Yes, so what do we use to quantify this climate impact? At the basis of climate impact quantification, there is the concept of radiative forcing, which is just defined as the change in the net radiative flux at the top of the atmosphere that is driven by a driver of climate change, such as the change in CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. So just to maybe more visually see that, when we have a climate that is in balance, we have the same amount of energy that will come in and out of the system. And if the climate is in imbalance like today, we have more energy that comes in, but less than goes out. This can be due, for instance, from the increase of greenhouse gases concentrations. And this excess of energy accumulates in the system. So luckily for us, the ocean is taking up a lot of this energy for now, but it's still contributing to warming our atmosphere as well. So radiative forcing is also a good proxy, or helps to calculate the global mean temperature change. So this is what is used basically when calculating the global warming potential for converting methane to CO2 equivalents. This is all based on this radiative forcing concept. So you use it on a daily, or some of you may use it on a daily basis without knowing it. So if we look at the simple example, for instance, the forcing from just 1 ton of CO2 that was emitted to the atmosphere, this extra ton of CO2 will actually partially remain in the atmosphere for a very long time, and this will create a radiative forcing that also is above zero, so leads to warming for quite some time. So here it's still not back to zero after 500 years. And this can be translated also in a temperature anomaly. So here I want to point out that the units are very small. You can see it's 10 power minus 12 and minus 13. This is normal because it's just the results for 1 ton of CO2. And if we look at the excess energy that accumulates over time, this will lead to another unit, the cumulative radiative forcing, which is also what is used for this conversion of methane to CO2 equivalent, for instance. So both cumulative radiative forcing and temperature anomaly, they are two interesting metrics for climate impact. The cumulative radiative forcing is more telling about all impacts that will be also related to inertial components, such as sea level rise, and temperature anomaly is more like an endpoint metric, so what happens at a given time. So I will use those two metrics also to quantify climate impact through the presentation. And now if we would have a one-time uptake of CO2, and that would be permanent, we would have more or less the same patterns, but just opposite in sign, so leading to cooling. And now we want to look at what happens for the three scenarios that were very schematically presented in the introduction. So those three scenarios of a carbon farming project that then ends after 15 years. This will lead to this kind of cumulative radiative forcing. So we can see that between the permanent sequestration in green and the other two, we have a very strong divergence over time, which means that we lose a lot of the benefits that was supposed to be induced by the sequestration. And now if we look at, for instance, three time horizons, so meaning we look at the impact only until this time, and we don't really care what's happening after that. So here I look at 2050 and also 100 years, which is often used, and a longer time horizon. And we look at the percentage benefit that is achieved by our two non-permanent scenarios compared to the permanent one, which is in green. We see that this percentage benefit is decreasing very fast, actually, with the increasing time horizon. It remains positive, so it remains a benefit, but it's decreasing very rapidly. And this was for the cumulative radiative forcing, but if we look now at the temperature anomaly, this looks like this. So we see that the permanent sequestration would lead to a very prolonged benefit in terms of temperature anomaly, but it will not for the two others. It will kind of decrease global mean temperature as long as we still have some carbon that is sequestered, but then it will have no effect after some years or decades once everything has been re-released. There is a small delay due to the equilibrium. And this is important if we look at that in the context of the SSP scenarios. For instance, here the SSP 2.6, which is rather an optimistic scenario, because it means that if we want to use this sequestration to decrease global peak warming, we need to have a longevity of the project which is long enough so that we have an effect on this peak warming. So this is also relevant, I think, for the temporary units, that it needs to be renewed if we want to have an impact on the long-term strategy. I want to point out, though, that in this plot, the effect of the project is multiplied by a lot. So by if we would apply the project on about 10 billion hectares, which is probably not realistic, but it was just to show or to increase the magnitude of the effect so that we can see the temporality effect without having to zoom in too much on the curve. And also something that is important here is that this scenario is rather optimistic. The SSP pathway with a peak warming that happens within 15 years. But we also have other SSP pathways that are projecting global warming to peak in many, many years or centuries. And so in that context, then the longevity of the projects, they become even more important. So I think it's a message that is important to keep, that our projects will contribute to lower the peak warming only if we still have some carbon that is sequestered after this time. Now I just want to show a little bit something about the permanency discount that can be used for certified units. If we base that, for instance, from cumulative radiative forcing, this is the same plot as before. I just filled with hatches the parts that should be discounted. And so if we take the time horizon of 100 years, it means the discount should be about 40% or even double if the release of carbon happens quickly. So this is actually above like many discounts that can be used currently in some schemes. This would lead, if we had 10 tons of carbon sequestered at the end of the 10 years activity period of the project, this would means we can certify only about 21 tons CO2 per hectare, or even only 4 if the release happen fast after the end of the project. And while this discount is based on a physical computation in a way, it doesn't mean that it resolves the issue with the long-term warming effect if we have a re-release, because if we look at the net climate impact of our project as well as the emissions that we compensated with this project, we see that because we use the time horizon of 100 years, then we have a perfect compensation at this time. But if we look beyond that, and if indeed the carbon has been released, then we still end up with a warming from our emissions. And for temperature, that would be the same. So we would end up with a long-term warming if the carbon has been re-released, even though we use the discount. And if the discount is lower, then the higher the warming would get in the end. So we can have the example of the other scenario where the discount was only 40%, and there this will lead to an even larger warming. And to finish, I just want to take the example, because right now it was a rather short longevity, so 15 years project, but we also have some projects that want to ensure longevity of at least 100 years. And in that case, it's true that if you take the time horizon of 100 years, you should apply a zero discount based on these charts. But even with that, as I said, when you do the net effect, it doesn't really resolve the fact that if you look beyond that time horizon, you still end up with a warming effect, which can be even larger than when you use the discount, because you compensated for more emissions in a way. Yes, so with that I would like to conclude and just say that I think the climate impact of the non-permanence can be quantified objectively, so I think it's good to do it sometimes. And it drops rapidly, this climate benefit, with time. And it's important to keep this in mind for if we want to use it for like long-term mitigation goals or decreasing peak warming. And the use of permanence in discounts is good, but it doesn't really avoid the net warming effect on the long term that results from the re-release and the compensation of anthropogenic CO2 emissions. So something that I think needs to maybe be investigated also in the future is whether we could also use this sequestration in carbon farming for compensating more shorter-lived greenhouse gases that doesn't have an effect on the long term, instead of using it for anthropogenic CO2 emissions. So yes, with this, I would like to thank you for your attention and take some questions if there are some.
Thank you so much for... Yeah, as I mentioned, because we have time in this session, we can take a few clarifying questions, and then we'll have time for some more big general questions in a general discussion at the end. So some specific clarifying questions for Flora? Back here.
Yes, thanks a lot. It's Claudia Kammert from Hochschule Geisenheim. I would like to ask what kind of different CDR techniques did you have in mind when doing these comparisons? Because I know that Jens Leifeld is also working on biochar, and then if we consider this kind of perspective that you just showed, there would be quite a big difference depending on what the longevity is, and I would like to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so in this case, we were not really aiming for biochar, because in the Marvik project, which is a EU-funded project for also designing more context-specific MRV framework. They don't have biochar as a mitigation measure. It's not part of the work directly. But of course, this will change a lot the results in terms of the percentage we see, because this is, of course, based on scenarios where the carbon was released rather quickly, at least a few decades or a century. So actually, the decay curve in terms of timing, it's based on some experiments in Germany from Axel Dunn, where they look at the reversal between cropland and grassland, and then grassland to cropland, so the build-up and then the reversal. So the timing is this one. And then for the more rapid decay scenario, this is really a theoretical scenario, like in case of an extreme event or something that happens, right? Yeah. And we are in the process of working on this kind of scenarios, but more with realistic data. So with colleagues from, also with Axel Dunn, but also colleagues from Italy. And I think that would be interesting to see that on more realistic pathways. Yeah. Thanks for the questions.
Do we have another question?
Yeah, thank you so much. Very interesting presentation. The calculations that you showed, they were deterministic based on climate physics. And then you shared in your conclusions that there would be an opportunity to go for a like-for-like approach where non-long-lived removals could be balanced with shorter-lived emissions, like, for example, methane. But these are somewhat different approaches, right? You can either balance the book based on the climate physics of how long is the CO2 in the atmosphere, and try to monitor that over a long time, and then really apply the discount rate as you've shown in your calculations, or balance with the like-for-like approach to say, okay, the CO2e that is stored just as long as the methane would remain in the atmosphere. And a third path is, of course, what Christian Holzleitner mentioned, that as soon as you stop monitoring it, the credit loses its validity, and you have to replace it with something. Could you say, among those three, what would you recommend for the market-based mechanisms to use?
Thanks for the question. I mean, I don't think I have the expertise in terms of market to really give an answer. I think from my point of view, the temperate unit is quite conservative, which is good. It fits quite well the fact that indeed we don't really know what, we cannot be really sure of what happens afterwards. But I think compensating for shorter-lived emissions can also be, if indeed like the calculations show that it's a good idea, then it might be an effective way of using it, because in the end you don't need to monitor for a very long period of time. So that would resolve this issue. But you need to scale it, because of course the methane has a much more warming effect at the beginning. So you would need to do some calculations to be sure that you don't have a warming initially, right? You cannot directly use the global warming potential conversion, I think. Yeah.
So just to follow up, because I was actually kind of confused by that too. I'm glad he asked that. So what you're suggesting is that those carbon credits that are not permanent would be used to compensate only for a methane, for example, a short term.
Yeah, there is also nitrous oxide, which is a bit more longer term than methane, but it also less long than
the
CO2.
offset to a specific source, which would be different.
Could be, yeah. I think I will do some work on this. It's not really completely done yet, so I don't have like a clear answer, but I think that would maybe be a good match in terms of at least long-term compensation. Like we don't have this drawback of having a warming at the end of the century or something.
Great. Do we have another short question, or should we should? Oh, Rolf. Awesome. Yeah, interesting.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed your presentation. Very, very interesting way of looking at these things. I'm still stuck. My brain doesn't process that quickly. You showed so many things. It takes some time. But I had also what we just discussed before. You're assuming that. Well, no. Let's move on. I still need to think that over. But you also ask about the scenarios and the time it takes to lose carbon. I'm a bit. I'm afraid that the carbon sequestration in arable land, as we discuss it, first of all, 10 tons is quite a bit. So you want to see that happening, and then I'm also afraid that the loss of 10 tons can be much faster than what you've assumed, and then in that regard, then probably there's not so much to be traded and to be offset or.
Yeah, I think indeed, if it's, I mean, it can be much faster, but it could also be that the longevity of the project needs to be more than 15 years. So it can also compensate this a little bit, because like the results depends on both parameters, how long you have your project to keep the carbon for sure in the soil, and then how fast it is released afterwards, if it is released.
Great,
yeah.
thanks. Actually, I
But
think we're
that's
going to
true.
move on to the next speaker, but we have time for some questions at the end as well. Thank you so much, Flora.
Thank you for the
Fantastic.
questions.
Super interesting. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Ahmad Abitar. He's head of development at the Center of Scientific Research National, CNRS, in France. And as I mentioned when I introduced the Soil Carbon IRC, there's the big harmonization effort, and he's here to explain lessons learned from that harmonized MRV soil carbon framework for cropland in the context of this ORCASA and IRC project. So I'm really interested to hear what your perspectives are on this. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Deborah. I thank Kat Pourmil for the invitation. And yes, I will try to speak about some of the lessons we learned in the exercise of harmonizing MRV for soil carbon in croplands. And this is in the context of the Horizon ORCASA project, which one part of the ORCASA was also the launch of the International Research Consortium on soil carbon futures, and it was only soil carbon, and now we're looking into the future, which is good. So our journey on these exercises for carbon, or at least for myself, there was Kat Pourmil was launched with the Paris Agreement, right? And then there was the project CRCF, was actually set the plane into the conditions. What are the needs for the MRV in terms of uncertainty, scalability, and then we worked on the project NIVA, which was addressing the agency for payment, how they are address the CAP or the PAC in the French. And this opened a little bit more on knowledge for us, where we could, in ORCASA, actually implement a MRV approach and try to harmonize different approaches. And today we're working on the MARVIC project, and we're exchanging also with the EU carbon removal framework. So first, I would like to say that we have seen this already several times. There's a diversity of context when we speak about MRV for soil organic carbon. The context of the national inventories. We didn't speak a lot about it in these days, but there is a volonté or the objective to have a coherency between what we are expressing at national level and what we're doing at the local level, and even more for agriculture, because it's like linked to land use directly. Then there is also the context of voluntary carbon market, and Bruno has explained this quite well. You have the offset and the inset, and the two exercises are quite simple to understand. In the offset, the farmer actually is selling his grains or his straws alone, and then he's selling his carbon credit alone. And the other one is, I'm selling the two together to the operator. And this is the most common and logical way, because the farmer today is working in the cooperative, and even if he wants to get out of the cooperative will come in and tell him, you know, there's a system here, and if you go out of the system, you will lose other services you are getting. So this is why insetting is coming in, because simpler for the farmer and the other thing. And we've seen that the CAP, we have seen the presentation today that is coming into this direction of addressing soil carbon. So it's a context to consider also. And then there is the issue of the jungle of MRV. The word jungle of MRV has been published as it is in the paper by the SMO, so I've just a quotation here, it's not my opinion. Many carbon farming schemes for the volatile carbon market, and also when we look at the national inventories, we have Japan going tier 2, tier 1 in France, tier 3 in Denmark, so there's differences. So we need to harmonize these multi-contexts. And when we do the exercise of the schemes, and then we need to explain in the framework, we see that many papers came out and with different frameworks. What's nice is that they speak about the same components, but actually they mention them in a connection that's not the same. So we need also to speak more about it. So the issue is that we're speaking about diversity, from diversity to harmonization. And I like this citation I put here because they are not scientific in mathematical sciences or quantification sciences. They are more into social sciences. And this is why I like it, because in the soil science, there is the soil who is heterogeneous and diverse, but also the community is quite diverse in terms of the knowledge that need to be covered by the sciences. So harmonization doesn't mean uniformity. It means about harmony and finding solutions that are being applied different contexts. So what we did, we built a network of research across the 4 continents. We made workshops, we got the feedbacks, and then we came out with an update of a framework. And in this update of the framework, here you have I don't know if this is working. Not really. No problem. We can use the pointer. We can use the laser pointer. So we have different components. We have the project information, reporting coming in, all the data sets needed, the transfer of information like remote sensing into the approach. And what's most important, then you have the verification. Most important that in the modeling approach or in the quantification, you have measurements or modeling with different approaches. So I will not detail these because I don't have enough time on this, but I will go into some aspects in them and then point we get out. So what I'm speaking about here, so how we go from the agricultural practices that the farmer is doing into quantification, right? This is our pathway. So first point I want to speak about is the measurements dilemma. It's a dilemma because soil scientists, we speak about the heterogeneity all the time, and when we are confronted with the heterogeneity, we speak about the fact we need measurements. So this is numbers that came out from these publications here. Sampling error is 5 to 25% if there is no accident. None of these are my papers, so I'm just relating papers, numbers that other researchers have done. The lab errors at minimum are 2 to 10%, knowing that Bruno showed this paper also, actually didn't give the number, it's 250% in this paper. So we're taking here conservative values, and variability or spatial variability is 10 to 30%. This we will not argue too much about it, we know that's heterogeneous in space. If we combine all these together, we can get at minimum from 16 to 57%. So can someone tell me what is the change we are expecting over 5 years for the soil carbon? This is the measurement capacity. What is the change that you are expecting to measure between 2 measurements? Like it. It's exactly 0.5, between 0.5, because it comes into this number as a 1 ton, 0.5% to 2%. I tried to put the right size, and this is what we're speaking about. So when we say that the uncertainty of measurement is high, it's not like we invented it. It's just this researcher said this, and it's not me. So next thing, we said that imagine that it's running very well, and we want to do it over whole France. And actually, we know that we have 9 million parcels of main crops in France. We know that we need uncertainty, so 3 measurement before, 3 measurement after. We know that at least the measurement will cost 50 euro, and I'm not speaking about going to the field and making the measurement. This is 2.7 billion euro. 2.7 billion euro is 40% of the first phase of the PAC. No farmer will accept it. The farmer were on strike because it's too complicated for administratively and they are not getting enough money. We are not going to tell them we are going to make a full economy of 2.9 billion euro of measurements. But in the Australian context, and this is a workshop we organized, they have very big plots. They can scale the solution and cost effective. They are not lying about it. They are running this way and it works. So it's about context, and maybe in some places in the US or in other places, even in Europe, it could work. Next thing, the monitoring by satellite. Satellites, I won't go in details, but we can use visible or medium range infrared or a microwave like C-band or L-band. And this, the penetration for the microwave is just the surface, and the one for the radar is 2 centimeters. I have maybe 30, 40 papers on using of soil moisture data from satellite data. So I followed the space agency. I was involved in the design of new missions. So I can tell you, we don't see the subsurface. But we can get the soil carbon in the surface and can be related. But if the farmer decides to put manure just before we get the measurement because he's intelligent and it's easy to do, then he can get high, and the colors we've seen before will be very good in the other presentations, but it will be a very nice trick. And this is a paper by a team from Axel Don, and I respect very well this work that has been done. It's very honest. And one thing that's put in the conclusion, still our result based on the repeated HDB samples, the German very well sampled, show that the prediction of short-term SOC changes, short-term 3 to 5 years, based on Earth observation data remains challenging and is currently not possible. The models, it's important to note that we've seen some models about microbial models. We worked on this aspect also. I don't show a paper on the uncertainty because not enough time, but what we want to say that when we want to scale to country level, we cannot use models that are too complicated over 13 parameters. We need to use simpler models where we can parameterize because we don't have the information about microbial activity. So we need to aim to simple models, and advanced research models, which I consider good models, are not necessarily the best choice for an operational MRV context. And this applies to many domains. But we need them. Then if you look at the models also, we see that we have inputs, right? All these inputs is about the biomass coming in. So can we enhance the biomass coming in? So for the biomass coming in, we can use remote sensing data. And this is something we developed here. It's a full system. It's called AgriCarboneo. I'm in the head development of this tool, working with Eric Sechia at CSBio. It has been transferred to many companies via the Toulouse track transfer. So the university says, okay, companies come in, use it. Maybe it's useful for you. Like Airbus, Netcarbon, you have the list here, My Easy Farm. So what we do is we combine Earth observation from the optical and radar. We combine it with a inversion method, which is a Bayesian approach. So it enables us to get not only the value, but also the uncertainty propagated. And we use parsimonious models for crops and for soil. And parsimonious means not too many parameters. We combine all these together. And this is a small part of the example. If you're observing the surface of the vegetation, actually, and you have the measurement of the satellite, then you can actually, by assimilation, constrain the model to fit to it. This is important because actually, if you have a plot and you have pests and you run a crop model, it is very difficult to configure how much the pest will impact the biomass. But the satellite is observing the reality. So the satellite says, okay, I will not tell you how many insects you have, but I can tell you that you lost so many leaves. So go ahead for the model. You need to reduce your production of biomass. And this is what's happening here. The model is coping with the observation. And this works well. And using this approach, we can go full-scale France and at 10-meter resolution, which we speak about 1.6 billion pixels here. And we do validation for biomass across ICOS and different contexts. We did something also that maybe it's a proof and maybe it's an personal interest, looking at the invasion, Russian invasion to Ukraine on the impact of the production of wheat. And we see here that in the area that has been in Kherson in 2022, the area that has been occupied, we can see the impact on the production. We evaluated at 22% at 10-meter resolution, and it validates with the export values. So what can we do when we have the biomass and we have this model? We can do something that has been already presented. We're not inventing so many new things. We can actually do the baselines, and we can do dynamic baselines. And we can do these dynamic baselines in the sense that I'm a farmer. If you want to compare me, don't go compare me all across the world, just with my neighbors. But since I'm producing something at 10-meter resolution, I can put a circle of 10 kilometers and say, these are the neighbors, these are practices, this is what satellite has observed, this is what the model has done, and we have a good value that can compare with to. And this way, we can, okay, resolution is not very good. We can have the trajectories, but what's nice also that in these trajectories, we can also simulate the presence or non-presence of cover crops. So then now, we can have the right scenarios, something that we cannot have in measure-remeasure. So for these multiple methods that I presented, we need to go to multiple passes, meaning that we need to decide which method to use, from multiple method to multiple passes. It's a big word to say we're going to a decision tree, which is IPCC recommendation 2006. So this is a decision tree. You see the voluntary carbon market, offset, inset. You have the agriculture environmental policies and the national determination. So depending on what exercise you do, you go ahead. And to make it easier, I made an example. And if I click here, these are synchronized, you see? I passed some time on timing here. Okay, they appear at the same time. So I can go first, can I do measure-remeasure? So we still convinced that in case of Australia, measure-to-measure, go ahead, do it. You can do it, yes. No, you can go for the tier 3, because there is a capacity to do tier 3 modeling. Can you use Earth observation with the model I've shown? Yes, then use it. If you don't have it, you do the soil model that I presented. So what I've shown already, all the steps are inside this exercise here, for example. And surely the last exercise I've shown is the best solution that we think that should be the best to choose. So these and many other conclusions, I just shown some of the aspects, are presented in the cookbook from MRV, where we worked at many references, expertise across the world, and it is downloadable from the project website. And I finish by this slide. This is a policy workshop in which ideas were identified, and funny enough, even the years after, or the year after, I worked, and then I was working on the conclusion. I found out that the suggestion from the policy are exactly the conclusion we ended up also on the report. So many experts here were also invited in this workshop, and the messages were: develop a modular, consistent, and cost-effective MRV. Need for collaborative effort between public research and the private sector to build a scalable and practical MRV, because what I've shown we applied with companies, right? We speak about it. I didn't show the examples. We need MRV that should be agronomic, that should link the carbon sequestration to agronomic strategies in terms of what type of crop cycles you're using. So we should be capable of modeling this. The MRV shipment should be tailored to regional context. This is exactly what we were selling on the modeling. And then enhance the international collaboration. And here I want to say that, indeed, it's time for us as a community to say, where is the global soil data set, but really global and really standardized, and go for it. And I think this is one of the objectives that we should aim also to. Thank you.
Thank you, Ahmed. Excellent. Nice to see tailoring to audiences. I think that's a super important concept in this world. We have a question in the back. We'll just take a few questions before our final speaker.
Thank you. Really good talk. So I just saw your numbers on the soil sampling costs, right? And I feel like the one thing that flashed in my mind was there's the economic cost, but there's also an actual carbon cost to this, right? There's so much, driving going around, so much shipping going around in actually doing all the soil sampling. And, are we chasing our own tail in trying to get really precise with all the sampling?
I call it the economy of measurement. I don't know the weight of the economy of this. I compare it to when solar panels were being put in France, and then it ended up to do, always that the project ends up good in 10 years or 20 years, and all the money comes to different operators, and the client is always losing. And here is the same thing. I think it's the way it's going. It was built. It's built that all companies. It's created jobs, and the farmer continue to have the same type of money, but it creates a little bit more jobs. So the economy of measurement, and this has been discussed in the community. How much we're doing effort into measurement, and then you added the layer of the carbon of the exercise. At this moment, many people in the team and told me, Ahmed, stop. We need at some moment to stop and concentrate on other directions. So I didn't compute it.
I have never thought of that. Oh my God. Here's another question.
Yeah, thanks again for the talk. And me again, I've got the question, do you figure in, our soil temperatures are rising around the globe together with the air temperatures accelerating decomposition. And at the same time, CO2 concentrations are rising, which will improve photosynthesis, and also the carbon inflow into a system. So I often ask myself, because I'm not from the modeling space and not from this kind of space.
This is all covered.
Is it
it's all covered. It's all covered because first the satellite is observing the real production. So if the CO2 enhanced the production, then you see in satellite, then the model is obliged to cope with it. For the temperature, it comes into the humidification and the decomposition as a term into the system, and also in the profile of the soil. And you added the third one, albedo, no, not albedo.
Not me.
You didn't say albedo. Temperature, photosynthesis, and the third one is CO2 concentration.
Yes,
it's included in the photosynthesis indirectly because then the satellite is observing it. So I think it's
will depend on the system and on the below ground microbial mycorrhizal association. If you have an increase in the soil organic carbon or in the biomass under elevated CO2, so that's what the most.
I'm saying that the parameters are in the equations. To which extent these equations continue to be valid, this is a science need to continue work on it. But today they are integrated in the system. Either with what we have presented in many presentations, it's included.
Great, thanks. One more question, then we'll go.
Well, as a humble representative of a small carbon farming program, I would say we are open to change our system to your approach, because we have the problem of costs in our program, and the farmers are suffering and we are suffering because we would like to use the money we get to transfer it direct to the farmers and not to measurement cost. But we have no handle to use your approach. Can you help us if we send our shape files from the farmer fields to your office and you give us the data? This is what we do with our soil samples, and we need something similar, practical. Otherwise, this is hot air.
Yeah, it's quite simple for Research Institute to answer this question. If you come in with a shapefile and you have data for validation and enhancing our methodology with it, then we will be happy to cooperate. If it's just to produce the information, I will guide you to one of the companies using our solution, and they will suggest a service for you.
Great, thank you so much. We'll move on to our last speaker for the session, and hopefully we'll still have time for other questions at the end, if all goes well. Anyway, our last speaker, I'm so happy that she's here, Carolina Cardoso Lisboa. She's a nature-based solutions specialist with Vera. And this is so great because, of course, we're talking a lot all around this issue of the voluntary markets and all the issues and problems. And Vera is actually one of the global leaders in actually making things happen in this space. So we're really happy to have her here. She wants to speak to us about experiences from the Verified Carbon Standard on carbon farming project certification. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Carolina Lisboa. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation and give us from Vera the opportunity to speak in this very important conference. I work as a manager in the agriculture innovation team. My main work on this team, it's really developing the methodologies that we have for the agriculture sector, and also looking for innovations and how can we improve in terms, particularly in terms of MRV for this type of carbon projects. Today, I will share the key experience of the Verified Carbon Standard on certifying carbon farming projects, and highlighting both opportunities and the challenges that we have observed. So just to introduce Vera a little bit, if you don't know it already. Yeah, Vera sets the world's leading standards for climate action and sustainable development. Everything we do is in service of increasing ambitious climate goals and accelerated the transition to a sustainable future. You see here in the bottom, these are the key, the 6 programs that we have under the Vera certification scheme. We have the most known one, we're going to speak about this one today, it's the Verified Carbon Standard, but we also have the jurisdictional and the nested red. We have also the SD Vista, which measure more focus on socio-economic benefits. We have the CCB, Climate, Community and Biodiversity Standards. And we have the new one, relative new, if I'm not wrong, it was launched last year, the Plastic and Waste Reduction Standard. And the latest one, it's a very, very new one, and we are very excited about it, and it's to be launched hopefully this year still, the Scope 3 standard program. Within the Verified Carbon Standard, which is the world's largest voluntary greenhouse gas program, we have also the agriculture playing a very critical role. And within agricultural land management, we currently have these methodologies which are listed here, more particular the first top one, the 4 top ones. Our flagship methodology, which is more focused on carbon sequestration, possibly the more popular here, you might have heard about, is the VM42 for improved land management. These methodologies measure outcomes related to removals and reductions. We have also the VM32, which is the methodology for grassland management. We have a methodology for enteric fermentation, focus on the use of feed ingredients to decrease methane emissions, VM41. And we have also a new methodology focused on the rice sector, particularly for flooded rice. And it's a VM51. We launched it this year. And we have a methodology which is not under the scope we call 14, AFOLU, and the agricultural land management practices is the biochar methodology. But this methodology is under the scope 13, waste and handling and disposal. But this methodology, you can use biochar for soil, in the soil, and no soil applications. And you see quite a huge interest to combine and stack these methodologies. You can, for example, have projects using VM42 in combination with 42 or 44 to also claim credits due to the use of biochar. I'll talk a little bit now about our experience in different topics. The first one here is about the project development. From the project development, we have several lessons standing out. One of them is the challenge concerned to land tenure and the project longevity. We have heard a lot here how difficult it is to make sure that these practices will be there implemented in the long term. And this is very challenging to make a contract with a farmer who possibly is planning, doing the planning for the farm in an annual base, right? Based also on market perspective and demand. Another challenge is setting baseline. Agricultural management, it's so diverse, and it's incredible challenge to set a baseline in such a large project with so many different practices in the field. Also, we have issue here, challenge related to additionality demonstration, right? And the other issue also is a long-term investment. And to measure change, particularly in soil organic carbon, you all know better than me how long it takes. We possibly won't be able to measure this difference year by year. We need at least, let's say, 5-8 years to detect these changes on the ground. So, as recommendations, we say we should, per project developers, we recommend early stakeholder engagement, a robust data collection, which we know is still very expensive, identification of regional benchmarks and best practices to advise the farmers what are the better or the indicated farmers they should be adopting. I mean, they know what they should do, but it's more like a motivation to see in reality what really works for the field. And also high quality, look for high quality certification standards or schemes, because this can give you a better chance to get a premium price on the carbon market. Another key challenge we have in terms of MRV. We talked a lot about this today. Yes, it's an incredible challenge. There is a lot of challenge related to the cost of samplings and feasibility. You don't have soil laboratories everywhere, right? And that's really difficult to get good quality soil measurements. We also have this issue in terms of the permanence requirement. We know that soil carbon is very dynamic, right? And we are being asked to keep this soil, this carbon that we remove from the atmosphere in the soil for today, let's say 100 years. And we know that for agriculture context, how challenging is that to have this guarantee. We also have this issue concerned to avoiding the leakage in these projects, because everything you change in your property, possibly you have impact in your neighbor, right? And we have also to measure that and estimate this impact. And also, it's very challenging to reduce the uncertainty of something which is, like I said, really dynamic. And sometimes it's really difficult to capture this uncertainty on your estimation data. As a recommendation, we recommended combining different types of measurements. For example, combining remote sensing with target soil sampling. For example, we just launched this new tool that can be used under the agricultural methodologies, VT14, which it's a combination of remote sensing with modeling, plus soil measurements. We are not getting away of soil measurements. We need ground truth data to validate this type of approach. It's not remote sense only. It's the imagery in combination of statistical models we are using with this tool. We also have, for the issue of permanence, we have our own VCS non-permanence risk tool to estimate the possibility of reversals from these projects. We also recommend early risk assessment for your project and adoption of the best available technology and standardized procedures. Yeah, just in terms of MRV, I want to say we started off, well, let's say, with first generation of projects, which was VM17 and 21 using modeling. And then we had a step back with VM42 version 1. We went back a little bit to measurements again and modeling. And we are now entering the third generation with remote sensing, and we are to launch also a new version of VM42, where we have a version 3, which will allow the use, we will combine soil measurements, direct soil measurements, biogeochemical models, plus digital soil mapping. And I'm very excited to see what's coming next. I see possibly we're going to see in combination, like I think Orcasa is already using, is also a combination with edge towers and flux measurements for edge towers, in combination with satellite, with AI, and many others. Yeah. Hopefully we reach our goal, which is decrease the costs and make it more efficient. Another challenge, and it's also sometimes a missing opportunity, is to align the carbon credits and we recognize the co-benefits of this type of projects. Sometimes, most of the time, we don't only see claims for carbon credits, but I want to say there is also opportunity to combine standards and certification schemes. And for example, the VCS program, you can also combine with the CCB program, which, for example, is for claims for climate co-benefits. And we also are just launching the Nature Framework, which is just pilot some projects to increase the recognition of the complementary benefit of this type of projects. Sorry. In the last one I want to mention, it's about methodology development. It's very challenging because you see science and technology is evolving quite rapidly. And we are doing this revision of methodologies, which is for the project proponents is really complicated issue because they started the project and when they started taking off, and then we are launching a new version of the methodology, which make it more difficult for them to measure. And yeah, we need to balance how often we revise these methodologies and to also support that this project's going to really work and make the project proponents, the farmers can make profit of it. And we are always engaging with leading scientific research institutions, and we try to use the best technology which is available out there to implementing in our methodologies, and we try to communicate as early as possible that we're going to review a methodology that people will need to prepare for the changes which are being proposed. Also, I want to talk a little bit about the Scope 3 program, which is an emerging opportunity in the value chain accounting. We have heard about this today. A particularly exciting development in this framework, and this market-based system certifies inventories within supply chains, allowing companies to co-invest and co-claim impacts. A version 0.9 from Vera. You go live by the end of this year, and it features such as interoperability within the VCS standard, and third-party audits and the public registry. The Scope 3 program it's important to distinguish which types of claims we are doing using under the Scope 3 intervention units. We have the carbon credits, which are used to offset emissions. It can only be retired once by one beneficiary. And we have the Scope 3 units, which help companies to demonstrate progress towards science-based targets. And they are used with rights to report, but not only once but only once per supply chain. So the MRV here, it's even more complex than the VCS program, but it's very important to guarantee no double claiming, right? And while the underlying emission reductions might be the same, the claims and the units, they are different. Yes, I'm not going to go into details, but I'm happy to speak with anyone who wants to learn a little bit more about this program. So the main takeaways from us here, I would say early engagement on MRV design, it's really critical. If you can't measure your outcome of your project implementation, that can be a disaster, right? Then you really need to start planning early. Clear guidance on permanence and risk management help build market confidence. Co-benefits are valuable, and should not compromise climate integrity. And as a future directions, we are working very hard to have our VCS methodologies assessed by the ICVCM and having the CCP label, for those who are familiar with these acronyms. We want to say here that our flagship methodology, VM42, is at the final stage of this assessment. Hopefully, we're going to get this CCP label soon, which is a proof of credibility of the type of claimings within the carbon market. Within the carbon market. The next one, we are seeing potential for more and more use of the voluntary carbon units integrated with the NDCs or national schemes like the EU CRCF, Christian mentioned early, like Vero. I think I can say we are interested to also be part of this program, and we to submit our methodology to be assessed. And yes, it can also, we see also alignment with Article 6. Actually, we have published in 2023 a guide to explain how you can use the VCS, voluntary carbon units, or the VCUs, within the Article 6 claims. You can use against the NDC, but you can use also under CORSIA or ICOA. Yes, it's also a possibility, and there is some mechanism that you need to follow to, again, ensure there is no double claiming. And yes, and we are also investing a lot in the digitalization of our methodologies. Yeah, for the agriculture, the VM42 is already digitalized, and that helps also a lot with standardization of data collection, but also decrease the time of processing these projects. You know, these projects can have like 200 pages. They are really complex, but now if you can do this in a digital format, it helps us also with the revisions. And yes, I just put here to this, this picture here. It's a project actually in Europe. I would think most of you have heard about the project from Agrina. It's a huge grouped projects across Europe. Is implemented across different countries. And we are very excited about this project. So far, it's running really well. They are doing a great job. That's it from me. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Carolina. So let's move straight in. You can ask questions of Carolina, but also the other speakers. Let's have the three speakers come to the stage, and we'll open up for a general discussion. While we're making the move, Carolina, I'm so curious about this issue. You're the only first person who mentioned it around leakage. And I know that one of the biggest, or one of the most compelling arguments that we hear against regenerative agriculture is that it will necessarily, in most places, reduce yields by some amount, and therefore we'll have to produce the crops elsewhere, some other land, and deforest or convert grasslands or whatever. And this issue of actually knowing whether you have leakage, because it's not just, it might be very easy, like, okay, on the field next door, did you save that forest? But it could be globally, it could be across the world. Do you think there's any compelling way to actually incorporate this issue of leakage and assuring against it?
Yeah, particularly in terms of yield, for example, under the VCS methodologies, if you can't guarantee that your decreasing yields would be below 5%, your project is not eligible.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's one of the safeguards you have. But I also see potential, like in terms of motivating, doing a better job implementing this project and give a good assistance to the farmers to help them to implement it, the best practices, is perhaps change the metrics. That was actually, I would like to talk to Bruno, they didn't let me do. What is the potential of use the intensity metrics instead of these absolute metrics? Right, and because there is also, we see a trade-off. You might, to increase carbon, sometimes that means you need nitrogen, and your emissions go up. We also need to do the full accounting of these practices, which is really important.
Absolutely, thank you for that. So let's go to the audience. Sorry, I took my prerogative of being up here with the microphone. Here, right here.
I have 2 points. The one point is that what you just mentioned, the leakage. The question is, and what do you think on that, if the leakage, that means that yield reduction is really a point we could not change, because at the end we know one of the points is the different nitrogen availability in the cold soils in the spring, and finally we know that we have additionally to the carbon storage, we have additional other goals. We have the goal to change our whole economy. We must change our economy to become circular, to become less reliant on the fossil, and that's only possible with a reduction of our needs and with a change to a circular bioeconomy, what means that we need additional biomass, and the point is the quality, that the biomass does not need to have the quality that we currently have. And when we put that into the systems, and when we then put some part of the bioeconomy, for example, the biogas technique in the system, then we know that we have an organic fertilizer which can work in the cold soils in the spring. So we might be able to overcome that challenge on the issue, and we have to have that in mind. An additional point to especially to the first speak, when we have the risk that carbon storage is only for a short time, then we have to face the risk that carbon storage in soil is always bound with with nitrogen storage, and when we release the carbon, we release also the nitrogen, and mainly in form of nitrous oxides. That means it is no option to manage things that it will reverse to lose the carbon again, because that will be a really big pity in case of carbon dioxide, of nitrous oxide.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think I really appreciate that you're pointing out that we're focusing on the farm and what's being changed on the farm and how to compensate the farmers for that carbon. But actually, the solution is going to have to be like larger sort of systemic change in the way it all operates. But was there a specific question there? Did any of you want to respond, or should we get another question? That was super interesting. No. I think let's get. Okay, thank you. We have two questions back here.
Yeah, thanks for some really interesting presentations. Hugh MacDonald from Ecologic Institute. Just to pick up on one thing, Ahmed, I wondered if you could expand a little bit on the Australian case, and to what degree this idea of larger scales could be a solution to balancing this issue of cost and uncertainty and the trade-offs that are involved around measurement.
Yes, I didn't go in details because I need to go fast on it, but when I visited Australia, I was not very knowledgeable, but I knew that during the workshop that we organized that they're using measure-remeasure. And what I discovered that big surfaces, but also a uniformized practices. So they have grassland and livestock, but then they have the same management strategy, and they move the live, at least in the area where I was. Australia is big also. They move the livestock, and they use the same type of management. They move them from time to time. So then somehow, and they have. Not, I wouldn't say totally homogeneous, but more homogeneous soil properties. So then now you are addressing the fact that you can make a sampling strategy where you need lesser samples, to my understanding, to cover something representative. And this is, I think, what makes it scalable in terms of financial aspect. Now, in terms of change, this is a little bit more complex. They have a sampling strategy that can be dynamic after 5 years, select the points, which enables a bit of flexibility because, we are looking at very short, small variations. I don't know to which extent this change over 30 years, you can always modulate. But I thought that it was interesting, and I think that we should all think about the way to encourage. We always think about the problems, all the time. And if it doesn't work, and the permanence. What if we say that carbon farming is actually good? We don't see anything very bad for the environment in doing this. And we relax some conditions. And we say that the risk is managed by ourselves as a community from European Union. Why not? I mean, I don't grasp so much of why we insist on this.
Here's another question.
Yeah, my impression is that now we are so much into the tiny nitty-gritty details that I'm wondering whether we are. How do you say, we are not seeing the forest for the trees. And I was wondering, the entire discussion about MRV, it's sort of, to me, and I'm in the business also for quite a bit of time, it's sort of never ending. And at the same time, we heard the presentation from the Thun Institute that the first time now they are reporting losses in grassland and arable lands. So, I want to stress a bit the need to, we need quick solutions, and we cannot go around and around for decades now. The 4 per 1,000 is now the 10th anniversary, and at the same time it's quite of a bizarre thing that at the same time Thünen Institute is putting out the first time emissions from arable land and grasslands. So then you really have to ask yourself, what have we achieved in 10 years? And the discussion is not 10 years old, the discussion is 30 years old. I remember the first papers from Ratan Lal that must have been from the 90s about carbon sequestration. So long story short, I'm really wondering at one point are we giving up asking for this mandatory MRV within farming systems for the sake of sequestering carbon? Why don't we go for what we had discussed yesterday, or what was mentioned, into activity-based support? And then you can take all the time you want to develop your MRVs and your satellites and so on, but at least we're making some progress in the implementation of measures, activities that actually are hopefully sequestering carbon. And we are keeping our fingers crossed that after 10 years or so, we can first time look at some positive trends rather than negative trends.
Very good point. I don't know if it was a question does anyone want to comment directly on that? I think, with Vera, it's very interesting because you're dealing with, let's be practical, let's do something. So maybe I would actually like to hear what you have to say. You're actually doing it.
Yeah, I don't think it's one way or another. It's possible a combination. I think for the methodologies, for example, perhaps we might see in the future the use of benchmarks. I think it's something that it's trying to be implemented here in the EU with the benchmark sites, right? That you need to measure to say if something is really good. Like Bruno was saying, there are some practices, it works somewhere, but doesn't work elsewhere. You know, it's not one thing that's good for someone, it's going to be good for everyone. It's really regional, context dependent, right? And we still need to have the proof that we have benefit of implementing practices. I think I agree, it's a challenge to measure this plot by plot. But we need to find a midterm solution because we also need to have credibility, and we cannot just be on the saying, well, let's do everybody now do no-till or just use cover crops, and then we are safe. That's not exactly the truth. It's really context dependent. And for that, we need to measure, you know, and that's why I think it's not one thing or another. We need to find balance there.
Yeah, and I know I heard Bruno this morning also mention that we should be doing these things anyway, even if we're not measuring the carbon. And I know that many national systems or our state, the California State Healthy Soil Initiative, they just gave money for practices. So that's a common approach, actually. But then it's hard, so that's a huge debate that we should have had people with two different opinions like give us presentations and talk about this, because this is an ongoing question.
I'd like to comment on this.
Yeah, let's let Bruno comment once, because he's actually said a lot about this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a few points. I agree on what Rolf said. I mean, it was my first point of you gotta change practices. One of the reasons we showed, basically losses, tell me how much has changed in the last 10 years in Europe. Very little changes in management. There's continued to basically constant management, so that's what you expect. So these changes in the adoption has not really increased. In the US, it's changing, and you see spots where there is, basically carbon sequestration. The point to make, it's still very small, and you still have to balance with N2O emissions, because farmers continue to put 250, 300 kgs in maize. They sequester 200, and they could do much better if they didn't put 300. So the mitigation could be even better, but you cannot decouple the two. I mean, otherwise we really fool ourselves. The elephant in the room is nitrogen emission. A reduction on N2O, it means a lot more than sequestering. The carbon, we should never think in single things. It's a system. That's why the livestock graphic that I had makes things even more complicated, because what about water quality? You have biodiversity, right? It's like really complex. And that's why I have to push the advocacy of modeling. You will never know what the right practice is in one place unless you basically do that. And the measurement component, we can't wait 10 years. That's the ultimate truth. You will continue to measure and show, but in the meantime, you have to use models to get a direction over multiple models, along with domain knowledge that shows, yes, this is the tendency of what is happening. Just to finish, that's why the SAF example, I'm not an advocate necessarily, but the annualization of the carbon intensity score, it brings the no-till farmers and the cover crop farmers in the US, they basically said, finally, someone recognizes that we've been doing this for 20 years, we have a better way of managing our land, and we never benefited from these extra possibilities. And in the end, it's annual race. How did you produce, how did you manage your field this year? And the lower the carbon intensity score, by accounting for soil carbon through modeling in terms of lookup tables, says here you cannot gain more than 100 kgs on average per year. It will lower the carbon intensity score, and they get paid a significant amount of money now from SAF, but we are advocating the scope 3 emissions to step in and be able to use that. I guarantee you, if that goes in terms of an acceptance, farmers will jump on that, because then now we're talking about real money, that people have to report the emissions, SBTi and all the others. So the companies, any public company has to declare, disclose the climate information. Despite our current politics, climate change hasn't gone away, and they're still reporting climate. So nothing has changed in the US on the private sector. Only they took money from us, from research, from science. And so to me, that's basically, in a nutshell, where the conclusion. It's complex, but there are solutions, certainly.
Thank you.
And DERA needs to play a role in this.
You know what? We have to close this session. We're already cutting into the coffee break. I'm sure everyone needs a bit of a break before we come back at 5:30. Is that right? Before we come back for the closing plenaries at 5:30. So I just want to thank again our speakers. You guys were great. And